Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the September Planning Committee meeting. Can I welcome Councillor Phillip to his first planning meeting? Great to see you. Thank you for being here, Theo. You've all had a relaxing summer, I'm sure, so now we're all eager to be controversial with our planning officers. However, I don't believe today we've got any members of the public wishing to speak. The meeting will follow very much the straightforward agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Yes, so Andrew Bray and Dominic Elston.
Andrew Bray and Dominic Elston, thank you. And Mr. Ellicott is substituting for Mr. Bray. I don't know that we've got a substitute for Mr. Elston.
No, because I think Susan's gone.
Yes, okay. So anyway, Mr. Ellicott is here as a substitute for Mr. Bray. Are there any declarations of interest or lobbying of members or unaccompanied site visits that members wish to draw to our attention, please? No, thank you very much. Minutes of the planning meeting held on the 3rd of June. They have been circulated. May I take them as a true record, please? Thank you. Are there any matters arising from page 1? Page 2? Page 3? Page 4? Page 5? Page 6? And page 7. Thank you. I am not aware of any business of urgency. As I've said, there are no public speakers on this occasion, unusually. So that takes us to item 6, which are the appeal decisions, and I will ask Mr. White, please, to address 6.1, Unit 6, Middle Borough Road, Timberstone. Mr. White.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think members will recall that they considered an application at Planning Committee in June last year. The proposal was for the change of use of an outbuilding at Middle Borough, which is near Wood and Courtney, and the proposal was to convert an outbuilding to a self-catering accommodation. In fact, the works had already been carried out, so it was a retrofit application. That came before committee. Now, the main issue that arose in that application was the proposal's ability to comply with policy RCT for the local plan, which, remember, is a policy which specifically deals with self-catering accommodation, and it sets out certain circumstances when that can happen. One being where it's providing additional holiday units on a self-catering complex. Another one being where it relates to a site that's an existing hotel or guest house. And the other being where it relates to a raw land-based business. Now, in this case, the scheme didn't meet any of those circumstances where you would permit as a matter of principle self-catering accommodation. So basically, it wasn't supported on the plan. Everything else in the application was deemed to be okay. It was okay in terms of highway safety and impact on neighbouring living conditions. So it failed on its ability to comply with RTD4. That's what the appeal has tested. The inspectors obviously rightly point out what the main issue, and it simply is actually, would it be appropriate given what the development plan policies say? And in analysing it, the inspector found that actually it doesn't comply with those circumstances set out in policy RTD4. They've considered whether there are material planning considerations which may allow them to come to a view contrary to what the policy would expect them to see, but they found no compelling basis to consider it was acceptable, and the appeal was dismissed accordingly and upheld the approach on the policy RTD4. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any questions or observations? Dr. Kelly.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's very clear and it's very helpful in terms of clarifying and evaluating that particular policy, so I think that is helpful going forward. I guess going forward it was a retrospective application, so what happens next?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's a good question. Matters are ongoing around that. We are dealing with other issues at the site. They have ceased using it for self-catering accommodation, but there's still matters to resolve on the site, and that's what we continue to work through.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions or observations, then we'll move on to development management, item 7. And our principal application on this occasion is 7.1, 614-25004. And this is for the proposed replacement of existing artificial slate roof with natural slate, erection of flues, together with the creation of ground floor external doorway where a window currently exists. Inquiry Centre for Outdoor Learning, Simmons Bar. Right.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so the site is Pinkery. It's the red dot, roughly in the centre of the plan. There, the application comes before this committee because Exmoor National Park Authority is the applicant. As Chairman's explained, it seeks planning permission for replacement of the roof over part of the building, which we'll see in more details on the plans in a moment, together with the insertion of a new doorway on one elevation and the insertion of 2 flues within the roof. As set out in the report, this proposal was considered previously in October 2021, and planning permission was granted at that time. 2 flues have been installed in the building. We'll see those on the photos in a moment. But they've been installed prior to pre-commencement conditions being satisfied. So a fresh application is required because we can't retroactively comply with the pre-commencement conditions. The application comes back to us for reconsideration because a fresh planning permission is now required, and that's what this application seeks to gain. That's an aerial photograph of the site. If I use the cursor, we're primarily dealing with this range of the building here. This is a section which would be re-roofed. The flue's gone in there, and there's another flue on this section of the roof here. Okay, so that's the only change to this roof is the flue in here. The other changes relate to this wing of the building, which we'll see. A bit more detail. That's the existing elevations of that western range of building. Okay, the next slide hopefully is a bit easier to tell. That's proposed elevations of the western range. So just using that slide to the right here, it's this section of the building we're looking at here. Okay, that elevation is the one into the courtyard. The bottom elevation is the one out towards the plantation, wider afield. The yellow highlights on the plan pick up on the main changes. So if we use the bottom slide here, that's the elevation which faces west, so the elevation we'll be looking at obviously where the cursor is on the plan to the right hand side. You can see the new doorway going on the ground floor and the flue that's been installed in the roof. There's a yellow highlight here because currently there's a sun tube on the building. That would go with the re-roofing work, so all of this roof here would be re-roofed with natural slate replacing artificial slate. The same on the courtyard elevation and also on the end gable there. And then that's the new flue in the north section of the building, which is just where the cursor is on that right hand side plan. So that's the bulk of the changes. And that really is just picking up that north elevation of the building, so looking external from the courtyard. Again, that's the flue on the end of the 2-story section, new flue on that north slope there. Those two elements of the work of what have been carried out already. So that's the west elevation. It's got scaffolding around it. Scaffolding is there because the slate is falling off the roof, so it's there to catch any slate. It doesn't hit anyone using the site below. This window here will be replaced and the door provided in its place. There's the flue, as we can see in the photograph, and obviously the full scope of the roof there will be replated. And just for that cursor, it's not that easy to see, but that's where the sun tube is. That would be replaced. That's just picking up the corner. And from that, you can just pick out the 2 flues. Obviously, the one on the main roof in the middle, one to the left there, that north roof slope. And that's picking up a bit more clearly. The proposed plans do show that smaller flue there can be removed, so it would reduce the number of flues we can see in that photograph. In front of us, in terms of the main planning considerations, Chairman, these are set out in the committee report. The proposal is relatively minor in its extent. They are of genuine benefit to the building, and obviously having a natural slate roof would be an enhancement on the character and appearance of the host building as well as locality. There are bats within that main roof on here on that western section. It does have a summer day roost for pipistrelle bats, but the proposed works can be carried out without causing harm to the bat interest within the site. And for those reasons and the reasons set out in the report, Chairman, it's recommended that planning permission be granted subject to the conditions set down from page 9. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. White. Members, Mrs. Nicholson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question or two. I think, no, essentially one question. I am assuming that we meant the pre-commencement planning commission last time and it really mattered. So I wanted to see what it was that hadn't been complied with. So I went back and looked, and it's about the bat roost. So I looked to see that that had been dealt with. And I find that the survey was done on the 13th of November 2025 and the report is dated on the 26th of November 2025. I don't think that can be quite right. This is page 3 of item 7.1. Can we know when it actually happened and when the report is and that we and it would be I can see no objection from the ecologist, which is great, but it would be quite good to have it quite clear that what wasn't done last time, was complied with, has been dealt with now.
So in Kate's comments, she said it's the date of the survey is 2025.
Yeah.
So Francis is querying what the actual date. In your
Because we haven't got to the 13th of November
in your
2025,
report,
let alone the 26th of
on
November
page
2025.
8 of your report, it says 2024.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think in your
No, thank you, Ron. Yeah, no, I think it's a simple typo from the ecologist in her comments.
Right, okay,
It's
so
24.
it might be a good idea to get that corrected. And that bat survey from 2024 is still current now, a year later.
Yes.
Okay.
It was not quite a year
But
ago.
it might be well worth just getting that.
So basically it should be 24
Yes.
rather than 25.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've got Miss Stacey next.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and Ben's keen.
Thank you very much.
Very keen, very keen.
Well, you were acknowledging that I wanted to speak rather than asking me to speak.
It was just a query, please, Chairman. It's seen as a good thing to take the sun tubes out of the roof at the same time as replacing a window with a door. And I'm just wondering about if we're looking at being environmentally friendly, has the applicant considered the amount of energy that will have to be expended by removing a sun tube? Lights will have to be on.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of removing the sun tube, I mean, I'm not sure how efficient the sun tube is anymore, but in any case, I mean, the work to re-roof the roof will happen in any case. I'm not sure there's that much energy required to, like, slate over where the sun tube currently is.
It's just really a query because they're usually seen as a really good thing because they allow you to use natural light rather than artificial light. But you're blocking up a window with a door and also taking out a sun tube, so therefore you must be using more energy to light the place. It's just a query.
No, it's an interesting point, Miss Stacey, and something similar had occurred to me when I heard it mentioned. However, I suppose that there is a limit to what we can insist on as part of a planning process, and we are dealing with a planning application and taking that planning application on its merit.
Yeah, I guess I'm referring obliquely to the fact that it seems a strange thing to do.
Yes, indeed. Well, indeed, not even that oblique. I think it's a full frontal one. That's very good. Right, Mr. Geen, and then Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, was the roof material a planning condition or wasn't it? part of the application from the applicant? In other words, did we ask to use that covering, or did the planners ask for it?
Chairman, it's not something the planners have asked for, that's what's proposed as part of the application.
It was part of the application.
Okay. Mrs. Smith.
Excuse me, thank you. Had solar panels been considered? Do we know when the application for this roof? It's quite a large size roof, and it looked like the sun was shining on it. So I just wondered, as we're closing off the light and the door, blocking up the windows, etc., maybe solar would have been a consideration.
There isn't a solar array on the property already. There's got solar. Yeah, not picking up on the other one.
Photovoltaic cells.
Yeah.
It was very early, wasn't it?
16 years ago, it had a roof that was made of solar panels,
Yeah, I think.
which didn't work terribly well.
No, but I think that's the most optimum position that they're in. The issue with this, and I don't know technically whether it's feasible or not, but as you can see, there's a plantation to the west there, which I imagine was caused some issues in terms of efficiency for solar. But it's not part of the process before us.
And it also had wind turbines, digital wind turbines. So there are all sorts of alternative energy provisions on that site. Are there any other comments, ladies and gentlemen? It is the authority's own application, so we do need to be seen to be dealing with it thoroughly and carefully. On the other hand, it is quite straightforward. Mrs. Nicholson.
On the basis of the questions and answers that we've had so far, I would propose the motion.
Thank you. Second that.
And can I just reflect that the proposal and the seconding have come at the end of the debate rather than the beginning. So if there's nothing else, ladies and gentlemen, may I see all those in favour of the motion to approve? Thank you. That is passed and then on. Right, item 8 is the local list of requirements for the submission of planning and other applications, and this is going to be presented by Yvonne Dare. Yvonne.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. This item relates to an updated local list of requirements for submission of planning and other applications. The authority are required to review and update the local list of requirements every 2 years. Without the review and any updates, if applicable, the local list does not apply and applicants would not be required to submit them, although the document still remains as helpful guidance for applicants and or their agents. The authority have reviewed the local list and have subsequently updated it. The most significant changes that have been made have been to reflect the statutory requirement for biodiversity net gain and introduce the requirement for simple calculation of atmospheric limit assessment in relation to livestock buildings within impact risk zones. National guidance advises that the information requested should be reasonable, having regard to the proposal and about a matter which it is reasonable to think will be a material consideration in the determination of the application. The local list should therefore only ask for information when it is necessary to determine that application, and it is important to ensure that the authority is proportionate in request for information. The draft local list as presented is considered to be relevant and reasonable in the national park context. On that basis, it is considered that the draft local list requirements as presented are agreed and the document will be publicly consulted on before coming back to the authority for final agreement. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So, comments, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Holton.
At several planning meetings I brought my soapbox about visual impact assessment and there's no mention of it in this draft document at all. Do I go home and burn my soapbox or is this something that should be properly considered?
Thank you. The answer, I don't think it's proportionate to add it to the local requirement for every application. I think we can still look at it on an application on a case-by-case basis and still ask agents and or applicants to provide that as part of the assessment of an application.
Where it's appropriate.
Mr.
Chairman, I was hoping to see a paragraph that said that under certain circumstances a local visual impact assessment will be required.
Sorry, Chairman, I think we can have a paragraph. I mean, what the local list doesn't do is stop people adding or providing over and above what the local list requires. But you know, I guess thinking out loud, it might be on schemes with buildings in excess of major development. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I would certainly support my colleague here. I think there are opportunities. There are going to be development proposals that reasonably, proportionately, do require an LVIA, and they need not be extensive exercises. The landscape and visual impact appraisal process doesn't necessarily have to be a comprehensive one. You can have a landscape statement, for example. So, you know, there's a proportionality involved in that particular exercise, but if it's recognised on the list at this stage, then I think it would support that information. It is important in determining certain applications.
Yes, well, if we can have a paragraph that says where they are appropriate, particularly in relation to major applications, I think that would be...
I think it would be most helpful.
Yeah. I mean, Chairman, I want to just point out that there is on page, sort of crossover between 26 and 27, there is reference to the LVA in there, but we can probably pull it out more clearly as a specific requirement. You know, I think the checklist on table 1 of page 4 is a quite sort of helpful reference point for anyone looking at what they might need to submit. We've probably had a column in there which is then linked, you know, clearly to it and pull it out for major applications.
So the reference is at the top of page 27 of the document. Some applications may require the submission of a landscape visual assessment, impact assessment, or a landscape visual appraisal, which are used to assess how proposed development could affect the existing landscape setting and on people's visual appreciation of the landscape and views they enjoy. But as Joe says, perhaps we just need to pull that out more thoroughly. Okay. Mr. Gein.
Well, Chairman, as somebody who's not a planner, I find it a really good document, which I think is really useful. So I'd like to move recommendation with the addition of this suggested.
Emphasising that point. Okay, does anybody wish to second that? And I'm not closing down the debate at all. Mrs Nicholson?
I'm happy to second it, and I have a couple of comments I'd like to make.
Please do.
I agree. I think as not a professional planner, it is a useful and helpful document. My comments are actually about the layout of the document itself and the images in it. When I was going through it, I was slightly puzzled by the... Oh. Do I have to start again? One, I've seconded it. I'm very happy to second it. I think it's a very useful document.
Yep.
My comments are perhaps about the layout of the document and its images and their captions. When I was looking through it, I was a little puzzled by the placing sometimes, and then realised that sometimes the placing was about the item before, not the heading underneath it. And I just wonder whether that could be looked at, and perhaps a little look at some of the captioning. For example, on page 19, an example of a dwelling being built in Winsford. Well, it's not an example of a dwelling. It is a dwelling which is a self-built dwelling in Winsford, and that's the point. So it's just that kind of thing. Just so tiny things, but absolutely, I would be entirely happy to
captions need to be more specific. Okay, thank you very much. So proposed by Mr. Gein and seconded by Mrs. Nicholson. Does anybody else wish to speak to this item? Otherwise, you're happy with the suggested amendments?
Jim, I was just going to stress it is a draft, so I mean, you know, it's just to go out to consult on it. Well, I mean, the whole format needs to be looked at. It needs to be brought more in line with the corporate appearance of documents as well. It's just the ability to get in front of members. If we're happy with it, we can consult on it. It will then come back, and as a finalised, hopefully much better looking document.
Okay, so in that case, may I see all those in favour? That's then con, thank you very much. Item 9 are the applications delegated to the Chief Executive. Mr. White.
You want to go through them all the way?
Yeah, we'll go through them page by page.
I think this first one.
So, page 1. Some very interesting applications in this delegated list, actually. So I hope we can draw attention to them. The one at the bottom of the first page.
One at the top of the page.
All right, we'll start with the one at the top then.
Chairman, yeah, this is the application relates to tree and conservation area. That's why the application was made. The proposal was to fell it. It is a highly visible tree, the conservation area. It is within the grounds of the Linton Primary School, but it's a pretty significant tree. Our woodland officer, who was specialising in trees, didn't see a basis to justify its removal. It's in good health. There's no reason to think it wouldn't continue to be, and they weren't going to any justification to remove it. So that's why the application was refused. It would then need to be subject to a tree preservation order, which, in seeking to apply that, there are options to appeal against it.
Okay. Right, bottom of that page, the proposed erection of the venison processing unit, but it does relate to another application further on in the...
Yeah, thanks. So this was an interesting proposal. So the application that first list was withdrawn, subsequently in the list it's shown as to be approved, or as approved. The scheme that was withdrawn related to a new building being erected, which simply didn't comply with policy, okay? So that got withdrawn. They made a fresh application which sought to convert a building within a farm building group next to River Common. That, I guess, for want of a better phrase, was more policy compliant. It didn't neatly fit with policy, because for it to neatly fit with policy, the building group needed to be deemed to be a farmstead. For it to be a farmstead in accordance with the local plan, it needed a dwelling. Okay, it didn't have a dwelling, but there's a good group of buildings there. The existing building obviously is there. The proposal was that they, in essence, produce it would be a cabin which would go inside it. Okay, so the works of the building would be very minimal. The equipment they need gets plonked inside, okay, and used as part of the building. Now, the activity involved was very much land-based. Okay, so spatially, the site makes sense. Okay. The impact, normal planning consideration impacts were absolutely fine, okay, but we still had this challenge with where it should go spatially, okay. So in terms of dealing with the planning application, we are then faced with looking at local plan as a whole. We have this issue, but we're then looking at material planning considerations, and that's where I think they play quite heavily in this case, because it relates to, let's say, this rural land-based activity. Geographically, it made sense. It made more sense to go there than it would within a settlement. Okay, it's using an existing building and is actually supporting, local employment, what have you, and the activity what is involved supports wider land management. Okay, which is of benefit to what the national park seeks to achieve. So when we took things as a whole, we were able to come to the view that the amended scheme, which is later in the list, was actually okay, and we were able to grant a planning permission.
I think that's
Good explanation.
Okay, indeed, and it's a very good study of how the planning department here does try to take issues in the round and doesn't act in a dogmatic way, but seeks to apply planning policy in a way that is both in accordance with the plan, but beneficial to the wider economy and community. So that's very positive, I think. All right. Then the bottom of page 2, it's just from.
Yeah, Chairman, the application sought to remove a condition of a building at a holiday complex, okay, which would allow the use of that building to be used by people wider than those already staying at the complex. Okay, the issue that arose with this one was it's got a very poor access. It's on the Valley Road, it's on the A396. Visibility onto that access is very poor. It's actually a very steep access as well. Simply speaking, from a highway safety point of view, it just wasn't acceptable, so we couldn't support the application. It's been refused. I know the applicants consider options. They may appeal, and it would be a good test to appeal. I'm not sure what they might do otherwise, frankly.
Okay. So, if there's nothing else on page 2, page 3, anything anybody wants to refer to? Interesting that the list of building consent for the replacement of the windows at the Congregational Church here in Delverton. Those of you that take local media will have seen the great strides that the Congregational Church is making with its restoration. And that's part of it. It's to be welcomed. Page 4. If anybody wants to talk about that.
What about the withdrawal, or is that where we
At the top,
event?
Croydon Hall.
Chairman, this was one, it was faced with quite a lot of local objection, this one. The proposal was seeks in part to allow use of fireworks. It's a very sort of quiet, remote part of the National Park. The conditions, if you like, that were applied on the original planning commission, I think they were compliant. They were applied on a sound basis. You know, in light of the objections that were received locally, I think the applicant decided not to pursue it, and it ended up being withdrawn.
Anything else on page 4? Obviously the discharge of section 106 agreement at the bottom of that page runs through. Okay.
Why not? Hey? Yes. Okay.
Second afternoon.
This was, I guess, one of those old applications where we had section 106 with the dwelling tying it to the land holding. That was causing the applicant some challenges in terms of operation, I guess. We don't typically add section 106s to tie dwellings to land as a matter of course anymore. The dwelling is still subject to natural agricultural option condition, so that remains, and we were happy to see the section 106 released.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Dr. Kelly.
Just that last comment, you're not using 106s anymore. It's not. Is it on the basis that this would have been considered as a standard requirement when it was imposed? And what's changed in terms of our prevailing approach to section 106s? Because I do know, we all recall one particular member who's no longer a member, was always making the case, with some justification I think, that there are some instances where a 106 could be valuable.
It was the tying of
Tying a new farm dwelling
to the land.
to the land.
Particular piece of land as
That's
opposed
right.
to use.
That's
Yes,
right.
and I think the prevailing view here has tended to be that the advice has been that it shouldn't be tied to specific land.
This is land.
Yeah, there's lots of complications with time. I mean, obviously, some dwellings are justified on the basis of access to rented land, and you know, we all know that rented land, you know, they can take different bits at different times depending on what is or isn't available. Similarly with owned land, I mean, you know, it is the case that sometimes land is sold off or new land is taken on. The justification for dwelling was based on that business need, that agricultural need. That's hence justifying the agricultural occupancy condition. It's not necessarily the case that you would then justify tying it to that particular piece of land, because that can change over time, and you know, obviously some holdings have bigger and smaller bits of land. So, you know, rationalising it and relating it to a particular piece of land to tie it to isn't always that helpful. The key for us is that they are tied to an agricultural.
So I suppose what I'm really asking is, would there be any particular circumstances where we would consider a 106 to be appropriate today?
Well, I suppose it's always possible, and thank you for channeling your inner Eric Lay. Always a pleasure to hear from Eric. I mean, we had this debate with Eric often over the years. just as really we were saying earlier about the visual impact assessment, circumstances or cases, and if there is a particular circumstance where, for whatever reason, it is particularly important, I'm sure that the planning officers would put it forward as a condition on that occasion. Up to now, most of the issues that we've been dealing with in recent years, it's been felt more appropriate to have agricultural occupancy conditions rather than tied to specific bits of ground.
No, thank you.
All right.
I'm happy with that.
But still, it's an important consideration for us. Page 5. Anything on page 5? Page 6. Refusal on page 6.
Well, I would withdraw as well. I do drawn quickly, Chairman. That was withdrawn Lisbon application simply because Lisbon is not necessary. In that instance, they would have an ecclesiastical exemption, so it dealt with separately. That's right. Yeah, practically we do that, so we don't need to deal with it. The refused application relates to a certificate of lawfulness. I think it was for the use of an annex as an independent dwelling. There wasn't sufficient evidence to justify the case in our view, so the certificate was refused. But just as we're coming to this meeting, we got notified we have an appeal. So that will be tested at appeal, and we'll see what the outcome is in due course.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else on page 6?
No, fine.
Page 7. So towards the bottom of page 7 you can see the reciprocal approval for the Exmoor Venison at Trueborough Common that we were discussing earlier. And then prior approval not required with you, Paul. Anything you say about that?
No, that's fine, Chairman.
Anything else on that page? I don't think so. Page 8. Well, shall we look at 6325002?
Yeah, Chairman. Some members know there's quite a lot of planning history at Pullman's Mill, but this particular property it's a two-storey building, but it's got residence accommodation in it with some rooms which are used as workspace. And the application sought to remove that workspace. In looking at that, we weren't satisfied that the loss of the employment space has been adequately justified. Employment space is safeguarded under policy. We weren't satisfied it's been adequately justified, so that was a reason to refuse the planning commission itself. And in addition to that, when we look at extensions to residential properties, bearing in mind it's not just loss of not just loss of employment space, it's also extending the residential property into that space. Okay, our policy talks about 35% increase. This, from the evidence available, would have resulted in a greater increase in the residential floor space. So that was also another reason for refusal. So with those two concerns, we didn't feel we had any basis to come to a different view than refuse it. And we'll see if there's an appeal on the back of that.
Thank you. Bottom of that page, Hellstone Bungalow. Do you want to speak to that, Mr. Lee?
Just to say that after all the meetings, appeals and so on, I just sort of wonder if it could have come back to the committee, and because it was such a controversial and complex one, and when I look at the objections, they were still objecting, so I just wondered if in this particular case...
I think that...
I'm not unhappy with the result. No. I just wonder if we should have been seen to be considering it again.
Well, I think because in this case it wasn't an application for the demolition and replacement of the building. This is for the repairs, alterations, and alterations. And I think it did fall very much within the scheme of delegation. However, Mr. White will explain further.
Thank you, Chairman. The scheme that was considered here, this application came in proposing something slightly different to what was ultimately approved. So it was amended through the course of the application. And those amendments, if you like, came about because some of the objections that were raised in terms of the application anyway. But it was a much less ambitious scheme than what we considered previously in this committee. So they were keeping the existing dwellings, retaining the existing dwelling. It was a case of they were going to recap the roof. They were putting some additional insulation within the walls, okay, which basically meant the walls got slightly bigger, okay, but it was all within the footprint of the existing roof. So, you know, whilst it got a little bit bigger, in terms of the perception of that, there wasn't really any difference that would be perceivable. I guess the bigger issue with the application was the proposal for an outbuilding, okay, because that is, again, introducing more mass, more building within the site, okay, and there's a slight complication. Well, we talked before about the planning commission from 2002 for an outbuilding, which was the north, I think it's the north side of the bungalow itself. We had the application originally initially proposed a new outbuilding to the other side, the south side of the bungalow. So there was a concern that if that had got granted planning commission, they build that out. There was some uncertainty whether the 2002 planning commission was extant or not. Okay. Now the purpose of the application wasn't to bottom out whether it was extant or not actually, but with the concern that it could have been, they built it out. What the applicant did in the end though was to amend the application to remove the building proposed to the south and actually put it on the footprint, or what was or would have been the footprint of the 2002 consented scheme, which means they can't build both. Okay, they can only build one, and that building in itself, whilst you know it's sort of I guess akin to like a double garage, was judged to be acceptable under policy in terms of the relationship with the host dwelling and within the context on the site, and the scheme ultimately was found to be okay, and that's what resulted in the planning commission grant.
And I think I'm right in saying that a number of the prominent objectors from the first iteration were content with the second.
Yeah, that's correct, Chairman, and it's really important. The landscape officer, the ecologist, people who weren't happy beforehand were content with the scheme as presented.
So I've got Mrs. Smith and then Dr. Kelly.
I think because of the amount of time and that we spent looking at this, it would have been quite nice to see what the final plans would have. And I know it obviously it didn't need to come to us, but it would have been quite nice, as the amount of time that we have spent as a committee discussing it, to have actually just seen what the end results were proposed. It's hard to visualise from your description.
Something for members forum, just so we can see.
Yeah.
Online.
They are online, but I know. Okay, good point, Mrs. Smith. I think we'll bear that one in mind. Thank you. Dr. Kelly.
Well, the only point I would make is that I'm confident that this approved scheme meets with policy now, which is good to see. It also confirms, presumably, that the appellants accepted the appeal decision, so we're not going to have a rerun of that controversial issue. I think there might have been a point about bringing it back to members for the public to see that it had been sort of properly discussed. But as I say, I'm confident that the outcome of this is reasonable. And on that basis, I don't think I have any further comments. I suspect, I hope it's the end of that particular saga.
Well, I think it might be quite good to have a site visit after the event to see what it looks like.
Yep.
To see what we can see from the path and
Yeah.
whether or not it is very intrusive to look at it in a year's time maybe or so. So perhaps that would be the most useful way of approaching this one, Mr. Smith. We'll mark that down. We haven't had for a long time a planning tour to look at the outcomes, be they good or bad, of our decisions. And so perhaps we could add that one to a planning tour. What's your math at? So, okay, helpful, thank you. Anything else?
On that page,
yes,
the application above, I would just like the planning officer to note that one of the parishioners who was at the discussion of that issue when it came to parish council saw the decision and said, gosh, the planning authority had listened to everything that was said in this room, which is afraid indeed.
Well,
Thank you.
Okay. Page 9. Anything there at all? No, well that concludes that very extensive list, but thank you. It's always, I think, very helpful to reflect on the delegated decisions, and sometimes the outcomes do inform the way in which we approach applications that we have to hear in committee, so it's very important to be aware of them. So we now come to item 10, which is the schedule of 106 agreements. I think it might be a good idea. Mr. White.
Thank you, Chairman. With respect to the list, I guess this one is massively different to what we considered in the June meeting. But if I quickly run through Sanctuary Lane, I think the agreement's there. It's just dotting some I's across some T's, so hopefully that will come off soon. Thorn Farm, we're in discussions actually with the local housing authority around rent levels for that one, so that one continues. Paracombe Lane, I think we're nearly there with that one. I think the other pits that need to fall in place are falling in place, so hopefully in the not too distant future that will be resolved. I think there's some challenges outside of planning with Sparkgate in terms of potential charges on the land, which have implications for the Section 106, but are separate to it, and I think they're being worked through before we conclude the Section 106. There's lots to do on the glebe, not just in terms of application, but there's lots of other things which have implications for this. They're being worked through. No Farm, I know we've got some amendments back on the draft actually from the applicant, and that's with our lawyers to work through. The paddock, hopefully that won't be here when we meet next month, because the agreement's been signed by us and gone back for completion, so that should hopefully come off shortly. Duck House is with the applicant. I think they're working through some of the details on that, and then the final two at Liscombe are also drafted and with the applicant to move forward.
Okay. Any questions, Mrs. Nicholson?
Thank you very much. It's always thank you very much. It's always helpful to have this. It's good to see when things go through. It's also very good and helpful to have the explanations that you give us. Now, if I looked up every planning application, I don't know whether I would get the information that I think. I probably wouldn't, because the grant plan permission doesn't happen until the. But what I think I would find a really helpful thing, but knowing that we would have explanations from you as to where we are and why, particularly things that are not to do with planning are sometimes impinging, but to have the date when we started on the journey, i.e. when we decided we could grant planning permission if either through the delegated route or through the committee, and so we started the process of the 106. For example, if Sanctuary Lane was in fact an application that was largely dealt with by the 106 this year, then it's not a very long time. If it's actually been sitting around since 2023, it would be a very long time. So I just think that might be helpful information to have on there.
It's in the code.
It's where?
Or it's in the code of the application.
So the fourth column along is when it says offers and instructions. I suppose that would be
Yes. Oh, is that the date at which point it's right? That wasn't clear to me. That's
but it has been ongoing since 23.
Yeah.
As it happens in that one. Yeah. So just so that's clear, that is when you instructed solicitors to start preparing the document.
Yes. That you instruct solicitors to start something does not necessarily mean it's the date you could have instructed solicitors to start something.
Well, let's take it that our planning officers always act promptly and did actually issue the instruction at the earliest possible opportunity.
Sorry,
That's right.
Good.
sorry, have I misunderstood? Isn't that the earliest possible opportunity date? You couldn't do it before the decision?
but I think that the point that Mrs Nicholson was making was, as long as there isn't actually a gap between the decision and the officer instruction, that was really what Mrs Nicholson was saying.
Yes.
And I was rather...
You were poo-pooing me, that's fine.
No, I wasn't at all. I was expressing my ultimate confidence in the officers and the alacrity with which they approach every case under their purview. However, it is a serious point. What we don't want is for things to hang around any longer than is necessary. There was a question, actually it's related to it, that was raised by some young voices about the cost of the 106, and I think that a number of self-builders particularly were surprised at how expensive the 106 was going to be for them. I think Joe, who had addressed that, Mr White had assured them that actually all we do is pass costs on. There was no charge added. It is basically recovering the cost and no more. And that is therefore what it is. But I think we need to be alive to that and continue to offer reassurance to particularly self-builders who perhaps have limited resources at their disposal. That the park certainly isn't seeking to make any money out of this at all, only do what it has to do in recouping the cost. Mr Holton.
Just on that subject, at the recent Exmoor Rural Housing Network meeting, it was suggested that to have pro forma section 106s would be very, very helpful, particularly where a CLT or something is involved, and Paracon would be very happy for our section 106 to be used as a pro forma if appropriate.
Yeah, it's in training, Chairman. It is in training, Chairman. We're in the process of having a standard.
Yeah. Mr White saying for the cooperative, so it is.
Good. Well, that's a positive, very positive move forward. Thank you. Right. Is there anything else on the 106s, ladies and gentlemen? So item 11 is site visits. Should one be necessary, it is due to be, the reserve date is Friday the 3rd of October in the morning. I don't know that we know yet that one will be required. It's always possible, so if you could just make sure it's penciled in your diary so that we've got that provision if necessary. So, ladies and gentlemen, with that, I will declare the meeting at an end. Thank you very much for your attention as always, and I look forward to seeing you next month.